Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Gregory, and we're going to go over topic for the benchmark fraud case study so that everyone has a really good idea of what we are going to do. And I'm going to pull up my case study really quickly here so I can go over it with you. Let's see here. Okay. So this is a fraud case study, and we're going to select a business fraud case study that was reported in the last 2 years. It could have gone longer than 2 years, but something that was in the news in the last 2 years. So 2021, 2020, 2021, and 2022. I Googled really quick business frauds in the last 2 years. We came up with some suggestions. They're not what you have to do, but you can also look at the ACFE fraud magazine for wonderful suggestions. And you can look at the US SEC for violations. Now, make sure that the article is robust enough. If it's just a couple of paragraphs, you're going to need to find other media resources or other internet resources on that fraud. So you may have perhaps 2 or 3 articles about that same fraud in order to get enough information to complete this assignment. So don't rely just on one document. You're going to have to look at a few others. Here's just a few. In 2020, we had a Wirecard, and it was a payment processing and transfer company in Germany that was conducting fraud. In 2021, we had COVID-19 business frauds, including PPP loans. We also had a telemedicine fraud and the Colonial Pipeline fraud that you may be familiar with, and that had to do with ransomware. And then also in 2021, there was the Vatican was fell to fraud and corruption on money laundering charges. So look up a case. If you're not sure if the case qualifies, be sure that you just reach out to me and let me know. You're going to design an investigation. And so there's six sections you want to be addressing. So be sure to read the assignment thoroughly for additional details. First, we always want a good introduction, which just is a paragraph long, and then the facts of the case. What was the case about? Who is involved? Has it been adjudicated yet? Maybe it could still be in adjudication. But if it has been adjudicated, that's fine. Tell us a little bit about the case. The next is we want to know about what evidence was identified in the article. So I want you first to explain what evidence is with a citation so that we all understand what evidence is. A lot of you have listed that already. You did a great job in some of your discussion posts. So what is evidence? And then what evidence, based on the article or articles on the case, did they find that led them to this fraud? If there isn't a lot there, step back and put your CPA, auditor, forensic examiner hat on and say, what evidence would I need if I were to prove this case? So think about evidence, what evidence may be within that case. Now, the next part kind of makes you shift a little bit. We're going to assume that you're the CPA on this audit. And based on that audit, what substantive tests would you have performed that may have identified this fraud? So if it was a skimming fraud, what are the elements of skimming? And how might you as the auditor conduct what type of tests to determine if skimming were in fact going on? So you have to think about the case and what substantive tests you might do to identify evidence to help you with the case. Next, you have evidence. So how would you develop a catalog system to make sure that you've got all of your evidence? And then how would you secure the evidence? What is your chain of evidence form or chain of custody that you would have regarding the evidence? And finally, if there is a conclusion to the case, what was the conclusion? If there is no conclusion to the case, what would be your conclusion regarding this case? Is there a propensity of evidence enough that it could convict somebody? Plus, how would you organize and present the evidence? So what types of ways could you present the evidence to a judge and jury? And there are several ways of doing it. You might think about timelines. You might think about organization charts, processes. How would you organize and present this evidence so that the jury would understand the fraud? And finally, were there any tax laws or other laws, money laundering, wire fraud, that the fraudsters were trying to evade? So if this was a money laundering case, what is the U.S. section on money laundering? If it's a tax case of tax fraud, what is the tax code that you would use? Now I'm going to bring over the class assignment so that we go over this one more time. A brief introduction, including the facts of the case. Don't make the facts of the case really long. You're going to include the links to the case in your references, but do put enough in there so that I understand who the players are, maybe what industry it was in, and that kind of information. Discuss the evidence. Again, define what evidence is. Provide examples of the evidence either from the article or from you as a forensic examiner would use to support this case. It also says in here, include how an audit may or may not be helpful in locating fraud. Ooh, remember, an audit might not detect fraud. So look at the case and think, how would I, as an auditor, would I be able to locate that fraud? Or again, as a CPA, how would you locate the fraud using substantive testing? So go back to all your substantive testings and see if there is a way that you as an auditor could uncover that fraud. Discuss the methods you would use to catalog and maintain that evidence. There's many different kinds of methods, so pick one that's going to fit. You can't use 4 or 5 different methods, so pick the best method and how you're going to maintain that evidence, including chain of custody. And then finally, prepare a conclusion of this case. Or if there's no conclusion yet, you could determine whether or not the propensity of evidence is there enough that would support the case. And how would you organize and present that evidence to a jury? And then what tax laws or other laws were trying to be circumvented? Here are my suggested headers and suggested links. You can be more, but I don't want you to be less than my suggested links. So introduction, facts of the case, 1 paragraph for the introduction, 2 paragraphs for the facts of the case. Evidence, 4 to 5 paragraphs. The CPA locating a fraud, 3 paragraphs. Methods of cataloging and maintaining evidence, 3 paragraphs. Conclusion and presentation of the evidence to a jury, 3 paragraphs. What laws might have been circumvented, 2 to 3 paragraphs. and your reference list. Now, again, you can go longer than this, but I don't want anything less than that. Remember, paragraphs. Follow the meal plan. A paragraph is 4 to 6 sentences. It starts out with the main topic. You provide your evidence. You analyze that evidence back to your topic, and then you use a leading sentence to lead us to the next paragraph. If you have concerns with developing paragraphs, reach out to the Writing Center in the Student Success Center for help. Be sure to provide evidence in support of your response to the case study. At least 3 relevant sources, peer-reviewed practitioner journals, relevant websites, in addition to the case source. So if you have to have 2 or 3 articles about the case so that it fills in all the gaps of the case, you still need 3 more relevant sources. Now, the attachment they have is just, it really goes to writing the first case study. So I would ignore that, but so follow the following. That made a lot of sense. Cover sheet, your paper, references. Use headers. You're going to get points deducted if you do not have headers. Please read all of the feedback that I've given you to this date that will help you work on your paper as well as your references, because we want solid academic writing. And you're going to submit this to Lopes-Wright. If you have any questions, post in the class questions for the good of the class, send me a Halo message, or set up a Calendly appointment with me to discuss this. And if you do set up a Calendly meeting, we will use this Zoom link to chit chat. Have a great week. It's a fun case. Again, if you have any questions as to if an article or a case or a fraud case is relevant, please send it to me. I'll look it up and I'll give you a quick response. Have a great week. Take care.